The last few verses have been looking at the process of our unenlightenment. Our unenlightenment is actually an expression of enlightened consciousness. Which seems a bit strange, doesn't it? And what's the point of saying such a thing? Is it just to sound clever or mysterious? The point is, when we're looking for the answer is not somewhere else. The answer is in the inquiry itself. We have access to it, in other words. We have access to Nirvana as we are. We don't have to improve ourselves. We don't have to follow some spiritual discipline. We simply have to see. We have to see. We have to direct our attention to that which is looking. And it might not seem very much. You think, oh, is that it? It's very disappointing. But then, if that's the case, you're still bringing a lot of baggage along in terms of your sensibilities. So a lot of spiritual practice is about appreciating the nature of the awareness which is hearing these words, and of observing how our sensibilities can work against this. So the initial point is that consciousness is such a wonderful, miraculous, omnipotent thing that its nature is to expand outwards. It's so full of itself. It expands outwards into self-created space and then loses itself in this expansion. And this is where we come in. We are lost consciousness. We are these points of expansion that we get lost in. So this is what the previous few verses were looking at. And they use the language of the alaya. The alaya is this consciousness which expands out from itself. And the manas is the individual mind, and so on. So it might be worth checking out the previous video where I covered these verses. Otherwise, I'll just proceed. Verse 873, bound up by the faults of speculation, since beginningless past, there is the growth of habit energy, which gives rise to something like an external world. It is mind, which is seen as manifoldness when it is hindered by wrong philosophical theories. So we get caught up in this process. This process of belief in an individual here that is somehow separate from the world out there, but yet is experiencing that world. We get caught up in this, and a sensibility develops. A relationship develops between me and this world. I might love it, or I might hate it, and I behave accordingly. Or maybe I change. Maybe sometimes it's wonderful to be alive and the next day I don't want to know. So there's all sorts of possibilities which are fed. This is our sensibility which is fed. It says here, since beginningless past. Because this is what we're always doing when we're not practicing. We are feeding our sensibilities. I've been feeling pretty good recently, better than I've felt for quite a long time. And I don't just mean my body, but I mean in myself. And I'm wondering if it's to do with certain medications. I've also been experimenting a little bit with legal mood enhancers. They're just to do with neurotransmitters like serotonin and so on. But I noticed, I woke up early this morning and I could see this rather familiar mood tone creeping in, one of anxiety with a hint of despair. And it was looking for something to focus on. Oh yeah, I've got some expenditures coming up, and I haven't got any income, so money's a big source of anxiety, and so my mind started hooking into this. But I could see the underlying tone here, the underlying tone of anxiety with a tinge of despondency. And I hadn't experienced this for a while, and yet it was the tone which tended to pervade much of my waking state for quite a long time. So it popped back up, and I think I managed to observe it for a while, and then I simply focused on my breathing and fell back to sleep, so that was okay. And I'd forgotten about it until a few moments ago. It is something that is part of my basic sensibilities. It's something that likes to be fed, and it's something that I was doing for quite a long time. I don't know if it's from the beginningless past, but you can think in these terms. You can think in terms of karma and rebirth, although I tend to think of it in terms of some kind of DNA. It's something that I inherited in this life, and it's something I'm fueling in my behaviour, and maybe if I had children I would pass it on. So as a spiritual practitioner, I have the opportunity not to feed it. So this is the challenge of spiritual practice. So this growth, this fueling of our sensibilities, of our habit energy, is based on the assumption of this dynamic between a me here and a world out there. So this is constantly getting fueled. It says here, there is the growth of habit energy which gives rise to something like an external world. But then it goes on to say it is mind with a capital M, which is seen as manifoldness when it is hindered by wrong philosophical theories. And all these philosophical theories are the beliefs that we have in terms of there being an external physical world. But the clue to our salvation here is in the realization that this is simply mind with a capital M, which is consciousness or awareness itself, just doing its thing. It's awareness it's consciousness which gets lost in its own manifoldness. You could ask why this happens, but actually you can see for yourself once you start appreciating the power of this consciousness. Whatever consciousness is conscious of becomes reality. It's like getting lost in a very good book or a very good movie. You forget who you are. The book becomes real, the movie becomes real, you get totally caught up in it. This is how consciousness works. It enters into self-forgetting. As enlightenment practitioners, we now have the option of entering into self-remembering by acknowledging the awareness that is hearing this and realizing its nature, its wonderful, miraculous nature.